Good morning. All right, you guys, it is 10:01. We are a minute late, so my apologies. I will try to do a great job of managing our time and expectations today. We have a fabulous topic on our Market of the Moment series. We are diving into competitive offers. So is everybody ready to have a great conversation about some of the new, old, everything is new, everything is old again market that we're heading into, and some great reminders and tips about how to navigate? Yeah. All right, let's dive in. I've got three of my favorite people who are joining us this morning. And so let me introduce, just in case you don't know who these folks are. And yes, if you'd like to turn your cameras on, we're gonna have a little bit of sharing about what these fabulous agents have done and how they are managing their business in a tricky market. And then I'm sure these are people who love interaction. So if you have questions, pop them in the chat, raise your hand. Let's make sure that we have this dialogue. We want to make this super useful to you. So let's do introductions. And I'm going to start with my friend Steph here. Steph has done an amazing job both building a business and serving as our compliance broker. So she's navigating all sorts of questions for us and is working with a clientele of her own. She's done about 4 million in business so you're rocking that out, and you've got a bunch of buyers that you are working with. You're doing fabulous on building that. Steph is also here as my kind of technical consultant. So I'm leaning on her expertise as our broker, so that if there are any technical questions, we can make sure that we fact check what we're doing so that you guys have the best information you possibly can. So welcome, Steph.
Hi, guys.
Excited
Thank
you're
you.
here. And we have Bethany Clark. Beth started in our office a handful of years ago. She did a great job building her own independent business. And now she is a rock star member of Team Trimble, who builds their business both out here in Lake Country and on the east side. So Beth, welcome to the panel. Super excited that you're here.
Thank you.
And then we have Amanda Schroeder. Amanda, hello, welcome. Amanda is rainmaker for a Key Home. Your team has done, I have under a Key Home 11.7 and then under you 8.4 in volume. You guys are just crushing it out there on the east side. Love all of the success that you're having. And Amanda also does double duty for us. Not only is she a fabulous rainmaker out there, but she teaches in our launch program. So helps with all of our new people to get going. So you guys have a powerhouse panel this morning. Welcome, you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So we're gonna dive right in here. Obviously, we're talking about competitive offers and how the market is shifting a little bit. We want to make sure everybody has everything they need to be successful. And we're talking with the panel a little bit beforehand. If the fact that we're holding the panel here right now isn't indication that things are changing, then take a breath, because this is the first kind of buyer focused panel we've held in quite a while. It's all been seller focused. So the market is shifting and we need to make sure all of our clients are taken care of. I'm going to dive right in with Amanda. Our first question, can you share a little bit about how buyer consultations have changed? They are the beginning stage of working with clients. So let's start there at the beginning.
Yes. First of all, I hope you're doing buyer consultations if you're watching this. And if you're not, that is absolutely a must do. I cannot tell you how important that is. If you ever have a goofy situation, it's probably because you didn't have a buyer consultation. And that's with all buying parties, not just one of a couple, both of them. If it's, family or whatever, you've got a few adults making decisions, you want all of them there. That's a super important piece to this process and doing it as a professional. When I'm doing buyer consultations, it's always about the buyer. I try to talk for
Honey, we can't hear you. Wait, try again.
You moody.
Sorry.
Cool. Headphones just
There
totally.
we go.
Perfect. So I try to talk for less than half the time so that I'm listening and asking good questions about their priorities, their concerns, their time frame, to get a better idea of whether if this market's going to work for them and if they have realistic expectations. And then I'm spending the other half of the time setting those expectations. So explaining what we are seeing in the market in a positive way. It's still a competitive market. However, we're seeing less offers out there. The interest rates are higher, but there are some options that lenders are offering. So I'm giving them perspective on what's going on now and what we expect to see in the future, why it may be beneficial to buy now versus waiting until next year, and give them a little bit of statistical information on what's happening in the market. If you're listening and you're asking things like what they do for a living, you're going to get a better idea of whether they care about stats or things that hit them more emotionally. If you've got an engineer, an accountant, you're going to go the statistics route. If you've got a nurse or a teacher, you're going to go the feelings route. So you want to kind of know your audience, and ideally you've found that out before you sit down with them, if you do a quick initial phone call. And then the other thing I'm doing is making sure we're looking at a mortgage calculator so that we're talking about their budget. And we're also being sure to mention those likely expenses from the time they get an accepted offer to the time they close, because people don't know about that. They don't expect it. And budgets are tighter right now with interest rates. So making sure you explain earnest money, inspection costs, potential follow-up inspection costs, closing costs. And, you're not the expert, we're not the lenders, right? But we want to at least give them some idea of what to expect on the financial side, because that's a big piece for people. And we don't want them to figure out that that's not going to work once they find a house they want to write an offer on and then realize they don't have the money to make it happen.
Yeah. Amanda, as I listen to you, everything points to communication, right? That's where even the toughest deal can be navigated smoothly if you do that well. And it sounds like from your perspective, it starts up front at that buyer consult.
Yeah, that setting expectations is huge. People get mad when they're surprised. So you want to help them see what's out there without it being like a negative, scary thing, but like,
Right.
Hey, this is where we're at and this is how we're going to handle it.
Awesome. Steph, Beth, do you guys have any differences that you take into a buyer consult, or any particular tools that you use to make sure those go really well? Steph, why don't you want to take that?
Sure. I'm definitely, like Amanda said, just using the buyer consultation to manage expectations right off the bat, taking the time up front to kind of introduce those ideas of how the market's going to be, setting expectations around showings and potentially how fast we need to get into something, depending on the area of the city or our market, I should say. But I spend a lot of time actually going over the offer itself, just so we can start talking about strategizing with competitive offers. I've been spending a lot of time with each contingency, mainly with the inspection contingency, just right sizing expectations around how we need to navigate that. And then also, to Amanda's point, making sure that they understand costs involved, but the follow-up inspection process. I definitely introduce buyer agency at this point, of course, to make sure that we're able to use our best foot forward always, our full scope of services always. So again, just making sure that we're taking the time up front to drop those concepts with them, to make sure that, like, when we're bringing them back up on showings, that they have recalled and they have already been introduced to the idea of it. And then obviously, of course, going over what they need, what they're looking for, long-term goals, of course. I do spend a lot of time, or I don't spend a lot of time mostly on financing, just because I think that those conversations with their lender is very important. But also, back to Amanda's point, making sure that they're not necessarily looking at what they can be approved up to, but what their monthly payments are going to be and making sure that they're budgeting and bringing up those ideas to them versus, don't necessarily look at what you're approved up to, but where you want to see your monthly payment to be. And then again, with higher interest rates, it brings down their buying power. So,
yeah. Beth, do you,
oh, go ahead. Beth, go ahead.
I was yeah, all of that. And then the other thing that I tried to do is even though they may be buying the house, who are the influencers in their life? Mom, dad, sister, all that kind of stuff, because all of a sudden you get deep into it and all of a sudden that person comes swooping in that you didn't realize was a decision maker in the process. So it's kind of good to like just kind of get to know your buyer and who their network around them is.
Yeah. Awesome. So it sounds like, again, communication, and this is all about competitive offer writing. So it sounds like really alignment, making sure everybody knows kind of all of the steps of the process so that when you find something you want to move on, you are ready to move en masse, because we kind of don't have the time or bandwidth to be back and forth in a competitive landscape, right?
Right.
So one of the things I wanted to circle onto, Steph, you had mentioned talking through the inspection contingencies, because that's a place I think where there's a lot of play for being super competitive. When you're out, obviously after you do the buyer consult, the next stage is showings, you're out looking at houses. How do those play together, showings and contingencies, to be competitive? Are you guys thinking about that as you're doing showings, or are you thinking about that as you sit down to write the offer? What's going through your minds?
Through showings, definitely. It starts at showings. Well, it starts at the buyer consultation, but then through showings, of course. And, as our duties pointing out adverse facts as we're, touring the home, of course. And then just introducing those ideas of ways that we can be competitive when it comes to the inspection contingency. I mean, I think that we are now past the point of having to waive inspection contingencies, thank God. But as far as like, talking about timelines and, if we want to be competitive, we can shorten up the timeline. I've already introduced the right to cure at this point. I haven't gone into too much detail. I'll do that later when we write our first offer, which Amanda brought up before when we were discussing how we wanted to talk about key points in this panel. I always make sure that I'm writing one offer with them, of course, over Zoom, going through the offer and pulling it up on my screen so that they can see the language. And then I'll go into right to cure more in depth at that point. Talking about the idea that we can demonstrate to the seller that we will not, quote unquote, nickel and dime the seller, and communicate to them through the offer with language in the offer that we can let them know that we won't ask for anything under a certain dollar threshold, right? Yeah. Which I think has been really successful for agents. But that also gives a protection for the buyer so that they can still have that inspection contingency. But I think tightening up those deadlines with the inspection contingency, giving right to cure, communicating again that we will not ask for anything unless it's, attempt to negotiate unless it's on anything super major, just to give that buyer the peace of mind, and then at the same token, give the seller the peace of mind. So.
Got it. Beth, how about you? When you're looking at, you've moved on to that next phase, you're doing showings, you're trying to think about how to make sure your buyer wins that house they have their heart set on. How do you make sure you're staying competitive at that phase?
Well, I try to make sure I reach out to the listing agent and get as much information, make a connection with them as much as possible, because there's things that they say or you can ask that aren't in the remarks. Like, what's the motivation of the seller? What are the needs? Do they need to move quickly? Do they need some post occupancy? Do they have a lot of junk that they don't want to move that they could leave and you'll take care of it? So there's a lot of like incentives like that, that if you don't know unless you actually call the listing agent and try to make a connection with them and create a relationship there.
Yeah, I love that. And real estate's a relationship business, right? And being
Yeah.
competitive in many ways means
Yeah.
having information and writing.
And there's a way that you can, we don't like to do the love letter thing, because it's, with fair housing, but with your conversation, you could kind of, convey some things like, first, this is their first home. They're so excited, maybe feel that out a little bit, and pull on some heartstrings a little bit, because the other side are humans too. So.
Yeah. And I think that's the really important thing, is that we're all human in this business, and you've got it's founded on a relationship, both with your clients and your co-broker. And Amanda, I see you too, shaking your head. Yes.
Yeah.
So goings and making sure you're staying competitive. What do you do?
Yeah, I think, one thing we have to remember, and this is easier when you're newer in the business and then you kind of forget as you go along, a lot of these concepts are totally new for our buyer clients, or it's been a while since they've come across them or they've changed. So bringing things up in the buyer consult and then revisiting them, or going more in depth on your showings and then revisiting them once you're writing an offer, the more comfortable and confident your client is in what they're putting in that offer and what that means for them, the more likely they are to be aggressive. So setting them in a position where they feel really confident and empowered means they're more likely to make the kind of offer that would be necessary to get it accepted, but also that they're going to feel good about it if it gets accepted and not be totally freaked out. So that like regular revisiting of these basic concepts of the contingencies and the timeframes. The other thing that I always do is remind them or give them the perspective of the seller. So, of course, you want to have these protections, but we want to look at this from the viewpoint of the seller, because that's who's picking the offer. So if we think having, a long time frame for home inspection is going to just be easier for us, well, from the seller's perspective, if the deal's going to fall apart, it's probably going to be home inspection. And if they have to wait 2 weeks plus off market, with accepted offer, at least with this contingency, and then find out it's going to fall apart and have to get back on the market, that's really unappealing to them. They want to get through it and move on. So it's just, they're so in their heads about how this all works that they don't really think about that always. And I think bringing that up is important. Like Steph said, pointing out adverse facts, giving them perspective on, is this home in great condition, poor condition? What are these things going on that either look scary and aren't, or could be? How could we handle that within the transaction? So setting them up to understand what this may mean moving forward. And if there's something good going on, helping them feel confident about it, so that if they are setting that threshold, like Steph mentioned, to say, okay, we're going to have a home inspection, but we're only going to ask for repairs if they're over $5,000, then helping them see, like, are we likely to come across something that big based on what we're seeing in the showing, even if we're not home inspectors, and making that clear, but that there are things we look for when it comes to red flags. So just giving them that confidence with good information.
Yeah, I love that. And I also love that you called out really perspective taking, right? I mean, that's something that just helping everybody understand that there are other perspectives in this. And if you, to Bethany's point also, if you can understand where the other people are coming from, you're far more likely to write to something that will resonate with them rather than kind of set them on edge.
Yeah. And understanding
I think it's
what other buyers are going to do,
right.
what other people think, how are they going to approach it?
You got it.
Yeah, I think it's good to set the expectation that this is not an adversarial thing. This is a win-win, so it just keeps keeps the game good, like nice, you can be competitive, but you can do it in a friendly manner. That's a win-win.
Yes. Love that. That's a great point. Great point. And actually, Beth, I'm going to come right back to you. one of the things Amanda said was making sure if your offer gets accepted, you feel good about that, right? And a lot of that is with price and earnest money, and like, I feel like I haven't overpaid, or I haven't taken anyone to the, I haven't been taken to the cleaners. How do you think about pricing and earnest money, Beth, when you start when you're making that offer?
I mean, some of it depends on what is the competition, which you need to find out by talking to the listing agent. Are you in competition? What's the activity level been? And then you gauge that. If you are potentially in competition, then, maybe you write the offer a little differently. Maybe you offer a little bit more earnest money. Maybe you have that due in 3 days instead of 5 days, or, maybe it's more than 1%, it's a stronger earnest money. A lot of it has to do with the current situation, and there are pockets that are still very competitive. And then there are pockets of the area that you have a little breathing room. So you have to just gauge it. That way.
Yeah. So know your market, know your deal, right?
Right.
How about you, Amanda? Any pricing, earnest money tricks that you have up your sleeve?
I'm going to continue to come back to empowering your buyers. So, I think that people learn best by seeing, and like I said, some people want stats. So I go back to, let's pull a quick market comparison. Let's look at what has sold recently, and let's talk about how that might work with appraisal. Now let's talk about what's currently on the market, what the activity looks like, and from talking to the listing agent, what kind of showing activity they've had, how many offers they have. So give them real perspective on not just the type of offers they're likely to get in terms of price, but also, what may we see come appraisal, and helping them to see that, okay, I can, kind of get a better idea of what it makes sense to offer as a price. I never give my clients a price. I always say it's, likely going to be over this amount, or it's likely going to be within this range. And, based on that, what you're seeing here, how do you feel you want to approach it? And in the most cases, I would say, even still, a lot of sellers don't counter. A lot of agents don't want to deal with multiple offers and multiple counters. And so even though I don't necessarily think that's in their seller's best interest, I'm not that agent. So I just set my buyers up to write their strongest, leave it all out on the field offer that they won't regret forgetting to put something in or not making something more aggressive, because it's most likely they're going to have one shot at it. As far as earnest money goes, I mean, I don't think it's the top priority, but you want it to be at least 1%, if not 2%. And then we talk about what that means. There is the chance you couldn't get this back if you run for the hills for no good reason. If there's controversy over the inspection contingency, and if we need to walk away over that. So, to help them get perspective on that and how that works. But it's really more about price. Obviously, that's nearly everybody's first priority as a seller. So we just get perspective on what's happening now and what has happened recently. And that helps us get an idea of what the seller's expectations are and what they've seen, as well as what other buyers are going through, right? If they've been on the market as a buyer for 6 months, they've seen a whole lot of things happen this year, and they probably are more aggressive. If they're brand new to the market, they probably think they're, can make whatever offer they want because things have slowed down, even though that's not fully accurate. So we have to keep in mind, we're going to have a variety of competition out there. So again, it's just all coming back to perspective. Like, let's look big picture. Where do we stand in the middle of all this?
Yeah, right. And I heard, Steph.
I just really want to quickly comment on the no regret price conversation. That's a conversation that I'm always having of, what is your no regret offer price? Where if you learned that this offer went $5,000 over, you would be in a competitive situation and it went to somebody else $5,000 over than what you asked, that you would be comfortable with that and knowing that you gave it your best shot. But if you feel like you would have regretted that decision and you would have gone that $5,000 over, then that's what I think you should offer, So, and I really wanted to talk about earnest money, actually, because I feel like that is just such a subtle strong way to make your offers really competitive by really upping that earnest money in a way that doesn't cost the buyer any more money than they would have already invested in the home. Earlier in my career, I did not really understand the weight of earnest money, and now completely do. That, if you can give strong earnest money and show that seller that you are in it and you are not going to walk away willy-nilly, I think it's really a really strong tool that we can now use in competitive offer writing. So
yeah,
I
great point.
think another good thing is, because right now with the interest rates jumping around, and it's coming back to what they can afford monthly, is being in really close contact with the lender. Like if I'm going to go see a house and I think it's going to be a contender, like we were probably going to consider writing an offer, I send it to the lender and they can review it, and they let us know what is the max they can go in at today, because that might be different than last week. So being like, so just knowing, and then that communication all up front ahead of time, so they know it's like, oh, your max, the strongest you can go is this. So we'll give it our best shot if you're comfortable with that, but then they know.
Yeah, I love you guys so much. You're just dropping so much. I think that one of the things that's going through my head right now is that no regrets conversation. We're hearing that, right? That people who bought in the last 2 years are like, oh, I wish I didn't, or, and I think people get caught up in the excitement of competition and the excitement of the moment, and having, kind of that solid presence with them at the, to remind them, we do want to write our highest and best, no regret offer, because you don't want to be one of those people down the road that says, oh, shoot, I went over what I could actually afford, or this is not what I thought I was getting into. So really great information, you guys. And the other thing that I'm thinking about is when you were talking about helping your clients understand price, right? You're doing a little mini CMA. How did they come up with this price? You're talking to the agent, but you're also, okay, this is how it was priced, and explaining that to your client to help them understand what they're getting into, I think is really super valuable. Which leads us, okay, we talked about the inspection contingency a little bit and how to write that competitively as you're writing your offer. Talked about price and earnest money. The other contingency then that comes up for me is the appraisal contingency. Do you do anything? And Amanda, I'm going to start with you. Do you do anything or think about that contingency differently as you're writing an offer in today's market that positions your people competitively?
Definitely. One of the things that became popular over the last 2 years was taking that contingency out completely. And I think agents should be really careful about that and understand what the consequences are. If you don't have an appraisal contingency and the lender requires an appraisal, if it appraises 50,000 below purchase price, you really don't have really a contingency that allows you to negotiate that price down. And that means your buyer's on the hook for 50 grand towards their down payment to make the loan happen. Now, could you potentially use the financing contingency as a backup? You could. It's not going to go over well with the seller or the listing agent. And that's messy. It's not a great way to go. So what we've mostly done and found successful is having the appraisal contingency, but setting a gap coverage. And so that's saying that I will, as the buyer, if it appraises up to this many dollars less than purchase price, I will cover that gap. And just making sure that they understand, if it appraises, lower than purchase price, you're on the hook for that gap maximum, which means that much more cash towards your down payment. And it's not really going anywhere. So you're paying that much more for the house than it's worth technically. And just making sure they're really clear on that. And when it was really intense, people were like, that's fine. It's worth it to me. But again, no regrets. I don't want them to later figure out that's what they did when they didn't understand it before. So just making sure that they're aware of what that means in the transaction, because you could also get yourself in a messy situation with that. And again, going back to, what is it likely to appraise for? Is it, a shoe-in, or is it
kind of an unusual property, because if it is, that's more likely to be top of mind for that listing agent and the seller. And if they're worried about it appraising, we need to do everything we can to remove that concern or make it less so for them, because we know that's going to come up. So maybe it means the price that we offer isn't as high, but we offer some other financial incentive, like a credit to the seller from the buyer. Again, that's cash out of their pocket that doesn't go to equity, but it gets them the accepted offer. So there are some things outside of that contingency to balance it out, or things you can do with the contingency. Otherwise, like Bethany said, keeping in touch with their lender, there's a possibility if they have a really great down payment, they might be able to waive the appraisal. And you may as well find that out in advance, instead of it being like, oh, hey, cool, this is awesome in the middle of the transaction. Get it ahead of time if you can. They can't always guarantee it. But if you can find that out beforehand, your buyer may be totally fine waiving that, and not having it as part of the offer.
Yeah. I would think that would be highly competitive. I think that would be, yeah. Steph, any thoughts on the appraisal contingency?
Yeah, no, that's always if I know that my buyer's a strong enough buyer, putting 20 or 30 or at least 20% down, my first phone calls are always to their lender and having them do a property check and see if they can waive the appraisal altogether. That's not often that can be employed, but it's great when it can, when it works, it's great, obviously. And then we have been seeing, we don't need to waive that appraisal contingency anymore. But using that gap coverage, as Amanda has already explained, has been successful. I know a lot of agents buyer's agents then will have conversations with the listing agent and making sure that we're helping that. It seems counterintuitive, but helping that property appraise so that our buyer is not bringing more money than they need to closing. So, like when I'm on the listing side, I will make sure that I am still, meeting the appraiser, giving comps, showing the other competitive offers, just to make sure that there's no issue for that buyer having to bring more money to closing. And on the flip side, as a buyer's agent, I'll get in touch with the listing agent and ask them if they'll do that courtesy for me as well. Please show comps, show the other competitive offers that you have received, so that my buyer's not on the hook for covering that gap if they don't need to, right? So
definitely goes to the win-win that Beth was talking about. This is a win-win game here when you're in it, you're being competitive, and you want to make sure that it comes to closing. That's the win, is that
right.
Yeah.
And I wanted to also point out, just speak to Amanda's comment about making sure that the buyer understands exactly what they're doing, so that, if push comes to shove and they do need to cover that gap, they're not surprised, right? We've had some transactions where buyers have learned that an appraisal has come in lower. They're going to have to be on the hook for that $20,000 gap coverage that they committed to, and they're upset. So it's really just, again, educating buyers and ensuring that they understand what they are committing to in that offer. So
and making sure they have that money. You can even go as far as providing a proof of funds to the seller. So a big gap coverage, having proof that money, like Joan was talking about yesterday, proof of funds for a cash offer. You can do that for the funds for
an appraisal,
down payment and appraisal gap. So that can make the seller more confident that they actually have that money and understand what that might mean.
And understand that a listing agent might be asking for that once they receive that offer. So.
And I love that. It seems as if it's a mindset, right? When you're going into this competitive landscape, you want to be thinking at all there, there are definitely tactics that you can use, but if you come from the perspective that I want to put my client in the best possible light with the listing agent, then we're going to succeed. So how do I, this is what I'm going to say, and then I'm going to back it up, right? I'm going to say that we can do this coverage. I will back it up with facts. It's always it's a two-piece process.
I feel
So,
like this is all good habits to get into regardless if, we're coming out of a seller's, market.
yeah,
It's just good for the buyers this is good habits to
yes.
continue.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So with that, that kind of is a really nice transition, Beth. When we think about this market now, are you feeling that things are more aggressive, more competition, more time? What's your sense of the market from your
It's
actions?
all depends on the area, it just, some things are still flying off the shelves or over asking multiple offers and some are not. So
Mhm.
it's kind of weird, so it all has to go into checking, researching the property, talking to the listing agent, trying to figure out where you are in that property.
Okay.
And then, and then adjusting your strategy according to what you find out, and what the buyer's intentions and needs and wants are, just because there are no offers on a certain property doesn't mean as soon as they get super interested, there's 3 that are going to come swooping in. You still need to go in on your best, because that happens so often, something's sitting on the market a little bit and like 3 days now on market seems like forever. But it's like all of a sudden your buyer, they're kicking the tires, and then they're thinking, oh, well, I can go well under, list price and I can do this and that. And it's like, you may not, because swirling all around out there, as soon as we decide to put an offer, someone else swoops in there with a better offer and you lose because, you weren't being competitive.
Right, right. How about you, Amanda? Are you seeing a same level of aggressiveness, backing off, or just like Beth said, different pockets of where there's
Yeah, I think it's like Beth said, area specific, but also how those homes are being priced. For the longest time, it felt like we were preparing our buyers that homes were intentionally, strategically priced under market value by 10 to 25%. That was just across the board, pretty much what we were seeing from like spring of 2020 on. Now it's all over the place. It depends on how the agent approaches it. It depends on what the seller thinks they can get. If they're pricing it at the high end of the reasonable range that they should be pricing it for, because so many buyers still expect to write over to have a chance at it. If they push that limit a little too high, fly too close to the sun, the house sits, and then we're having a different discussion about price and how we're approaching that offer. Whereas someone who is really keeping that strategy in mind and pricing lower, we're more likely to see more offers. So we're letting them know like that's still happening, but it's not 100% the rule. And so each property, we have that discussion before we even go look at it. Is this one that's going to sell for more, most likely? Is this one that's likely to attract more offers? So again, setting those expectations, getting them perspective on that particular property and how it's priced. But yeah, I think Bethany's right. It always seems that if something's sitting, the minute you want to write an offer, there's at least one more that pops up. And again, it's all about keeping in touch with that listing agent. You're not only getting the information you need for your client, but you're building that relationship. And I always feel more confident as a listing agent when I have an offer from an agent that I either know or has taken the time to build a relationship with me and given me some helpful information about their client or where they're coming from with their offer. There's only so much you can get out of what's on paper. And sellers want, and listing agents in advocacy for their sellers want more certainty. So the more you can provide to help them feel confident and certain, and give them an idea of what this transaction is going to be like, you can stand out in the crowd. And it's worked for us more than once that agent felt so comfortable with me and my team or one of my team members, that seller accepted our offer at a lower price point or less appealing terms because they knew that we would keep this smooth, easy, non-dramatic and get them to closing. So it's not just about the pieces of the offer, but with the competition that's out there, how is their agent approaching it? How are we approaching it? And I think always acting as if there's competition still right now, the inventory is low, the demand is still there. It's dropped, but there's still more demand than inventory. And so we have to act as if we're in competition.
Yeah, I love that. I love also this idea that of reputation as a competitive advantage, right? And it speaks to making sure that when you do have a transaction that goes well, you're using reviews, and you're making sure that across the board you are maintaining a really good reputation out there, because it precedes you, especially in this environment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
burn
and I
bridges
think
with other
doing
agents.
feedback on showing time, being polite and giving good feedback, because that listing agent you might come across, that may not be the house, but you might come across them again. And if they remember you being timely and giving constructive feedback, maybe thanking them for, letting us look at the house, this or that or the other thing, it just kind of plants a seed.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Being considerate when you schedule the showing, giving enough notice.
Yep.
Not leaving the door wide open while you're in the house, putting the key back. Letting
Right.
them know if there's something wrong with the house that they might not know about.
Yeah. Yeah.
All those things add up.
Yeah. Steph, what's your opinion of the aggressiveness out there? What are you seeing?
Back to Amanda's point, like it seems like the Wild West out there, like it's all over the place. I mean, I think as buyer's agents now, we're having to do more homework than ever before, as far as really making sure that, looking at trends in the areas, back to Amanda's point again about like the listing agent, maybe looking at to see if it's a newer listing agent too. But yeah, I mean, it's just trying to get a sense of whether or not you think it's going to go over. So yeah, it seems like the Wild West. I like Bethany's point too about, you can see still multiple offers a week into the home being on the market. So don't forget that fact as well. It does just seem like the Wild West right now in terms of, before it was consistently, there will be 10 plus offers on this home. You need to get it in within 2 days, whatever the listing agent had instructed. And now it doesn't seem to be the case. So.
Okay. Now we're in for like our $1 million questions here. What are winning strategies that you've used that we may not have talked about? And Steph, I'm going to start with you.
Bethany started bringing these up earlier in the panel discussion. It's so key to get on the phone with the listing agent right away, asking those questions. What other things would the seller want to see? I love that idea of, I wrote an offer on a home that was clearly in a state, and the buyer told the seller that they would clean out the house for them. They could take what they wanted and leave the rest if they wanted. That was a really good, that's what got them to win. Talking about post-close occupancy, I mean, regardless of the market we're in, it is always nice for the seller to have that cushion, a week cushion to move out of their home and not feel pressured to get out. I think post-close occupancy, I mean, as much as potential headaches there are associated with post-close occupancy, giving a few days, I think, is really meaningful. Again, just asking questions. Is there anything else that the seller would want to see? I think demonstrating your organization when it comes to delivering an offer, just demonstrating yourself and showing your reputation throughout key points in the transaction, and showing that you're going to be easy to work with. Little things like, when you're sending the offer off, making sure you're putting the terms of the offer in the body of the email, doing one PDF of the offer when you send it, giving in text messages, giving a heads up that you have sent it, those kind of small details that truly, truly do add up. As it relates to the listing agent receiving the offer and knowing that you are going to be great to work with and responsive and organized. So you'll definitely shine. So
personalized and considerate is what I'm hearing. Just
Yes.
yeah. Love that. I love that. Beth, how about you? What are winning strategies that you
Yeah, so like post occupancy was a big thing in this past crazy market, because sellers were selling before they had a place to go, that kind of thing. So finding out that, I don't know if that's going to be as much anymore, but still, like Steph said, having a cushion where they don't have to have the truck loaded on closing day is really nice for them. I mean, a 3-day thing could win the deal. So if your buyers can give them 3 days to win the deal, that's awesome. I know that I've seen, and I have done, we pay the gap insurance, or maybe we pay taxes through the rest of the year, or
Sure.
combination of, things like that, where it's like, it may not be a ton of money, but it's just a little crumb more that puts you above, that kind of thing.
consideration? Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. How about you, Amanda? What are we missing here?
I would say when you're calling that listing agent, do it before the showing. They are more likely to tell you more before they think you're writing an offer. So getting that information before the showing, setting your buyer's expectations before the showing, or being able to talk about it while you're in the house, I think just puts them in a better state of mind. And also, how quickly you have to move. If you go on the showing blindly and then contact the agent and they're like, oh yeah, we have offers in hand, we're reviewing in 30 minutes. And you're like, cool, well, that's good for nothing then.
Yeah.
So just setting yourself up for success, because you also, you have schedules to coordinate between yourself, your buyer, the listing agent, everybody. So just getting the lay of the land on timing, I think, is really important. So nobody feels rushed. Nobody wants to make a big decision like this in a hurry. And mistakes are made in offers when you're writing them quickly. So also looking for signs of what's important to the seller on your showings. So do they have, what is in the house? Like, you don't want to be nosy about their stuff, but you might notice a, diploma from somewhere that your buyer went to school there, or like they're fans of a sports team that your buyers care about, or they obviously have a dog, or whatever it is. There might be some like personal connections there that you could mention to the agent that might help win that for you, for your buyers. Also, like Steph said, be really thoughtful about how you fill out the documents. Making sure they're complete and filled out correctly is sadly not that common. And doing that will make you stand out in a good way. I can't tell you how often as a listing agent, I get offers that aren't even filled out correctly. And it makes me worry that the buyer doesn't really know what they signed and the buyer agent doesn't know what they're doing. So being really smart about how you're filling that out and not missing anything, checking it, triple checking it before you send it. Don't like make yourself look bad and your buyer look bad because you forgot to do something in an offer that you should have caught. Steph said putting everything in one PDF. Also make sure it's in order. Like don't start with the addendum S, start with the offer. I always put a cover page on it, so it has everything in one handy spot. If they're printing it out or they're pulling up the document, it's right there for their seller, or with, kind of explanation of what these things are. Did I talk to the lender to confirm the deadlines for these very short loan commitment due date or closing due date? Going beyond that, having the lender contact the listing agent directly to assure them that they're on top of it, that they can handle those due dates and deadlines, that they have, whatever it is, in-house underwriters, all that stuff can make a difference. And then let's see. Oh, Steph mentioned newer listing agents. Whether they're new or not, there's a nice way to make sure they understand what's in your offer. So reaching out to them and just saying, do you, have you worked with escalation clauses before? Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure. Or, hey, have you come across like appraisal gap coverage before? Or hey, their down payment, just so you know, is 5%, but they really have 10% in hand and they're hanging on to some of it to cover that gap in appraisal. So we're going to send a proof of funds and this is what it means. So just helping them to do a better job of delivering and selling your offer to their seller so they feel empowered and informed, I think is an important piece. And there's a way to do it without sounding like a jerk who thinks they don't know how to do their job. So be careful about how you approach that. But I think that's also an important piece, because I do feel like sometimes really creative things within an offer don't get across to the seller because their agent doesn't understand it.
Right. Yeah, I know that there were some agents that didn't early on when we were doing like inspection, like limitations, for each individual defect, blah, blah, blah. And they hadn't ever come across an offer like that. So they're like, oh, that's a really good idea. So explaining that or reaching out, and because what if it's an elderly seller and they aren't going to do an escalation clause? Maybe the agent knows how to do it and done, but they're just like, my guy, just we prefer that not to happen. So you don't want to do it then.
Right.
Yep.
One of the things that's just striking to me as I listen to all three of you is that there's such a high level of professionalism, right? You're dealing with the tactics of the writing, right? Just making sure that you're writing a great offer. You're explaining that offer to multiple audiences. You're building relationship. You're being courteous. You're, as Amanda said, you're not being a jerk when you're highlighting things. Gosh, it's no wonder you guys are on this panel because you have a lot to offer. The job is challenging, right? Especially as things transition. You all talked about, you kind of don't know what you're stepping into. Is this somebody who's acting out of the market 6 months ago? Is this a market that's 6 months ahead of where we are now? So it's kind of like you're navigating your clients on a tightrope. And you've given people a lot of things, I think, that they can think about as they're prepping their clients. We did have one question. Amanda, you said call the listing agent before you do a showing. Is that for every showing that you go on, or when you think that may really, how do you navigate between all of those calls and maybe the ones that really make a difference for you?
Yeah, I really at the very least, I do it for any home that I think is likely one we're going to write on. The more you do this, if you're a newer agent, the more you do this, the more you're just going to know. If you're really aware of what's important to your buyers and how that's changed over the course of your showings with them, the more likely you are to know when a house is going to be a really good fit for them and worth an aggressive offer and something they can afford to make an aggressive offer on. And so those especially I'm calling ahead of time. But anytime it's one where I don't know the agent or the information in MLS seems a little slim, if there's a question that I have, anything like that, I try to call them ahead of time. It also gives me an idea of who we're dealing with. So if I need to send something in quickly or I need a response quickly, like, are they a phone person? Are they a text person? Do they not respond for 2 days? That gives us insight as well, who we're dealing with.
Got it. And before I let you guys go, I will invite everybody, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat. I'll make sure that we ask them. And I'm also curious, finances are such a thing right now. Can I afford this? Is this going up? What's my monthly payment going to be? How do I do this? How do you navigate your relationship with the lender and your client? And are they a big part of this conversation early on? Do you encourage throughout? What's your strategy with that? Steph, I'll start with you.
No, your relationship with your buyer's lender is very important. And if it's somebody who I haven't suggested already, I will get permission from the buyer to make contact with their lender ahead of time so that I can make sure that they're on hand if I have questions when we come to write an offer. What's their communication style? Can I text you if I have questions on behalf of the buyer? I do like to, I personally like to kind of take control a little bit and not rely on the buyer to ask the questions that I need to be answered. So I want to have a direct line of communication with their lender for sure. And that is another point that we didn't really make about the buyer consultation, as far as, helping to guide your buyer and who they use for a lender, right? So, we want to make sure that's another competitive tool that we didn't even really touch on is which lender are they using? Is it a local lender, right? That's definitely something that sellers are looking at. Those bigger banks is really hard to work with and may not be able to meet deadlines. So that's definitely a very key piece in all of this. But then as far as like guiding, who that buyer might work with, and if it's somebody who you work with really well, it just makes the process that much easier. So, yep, very important.
Yeah.
Thanks. Beth, yeah, Amanda, any
Oh,
other?
for sure. I feel like with the lenders that I use, it's like we are a team. It's like it's not a separation at all. It's like we are a team all going towards the same goal. Maybe one person's the quarterback, but we're all a team, and we all have to cross the finish line together. And so it's like, yeah, just kind of setting the tone with the lender too, that it's like need constant communication because things go quickly and things change. And, with the interest rates jumping around, it's like I said before, it's like what they could afford last week may not be what they can afford this week. And you have to change your search or what you go look at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that it is so much for a buyer to navigate the part with you and the part with their lender from the beginning and once you get an accepted offer. And the more we can smooth that out for them, the better, because they get overwhelmed and that's what causes them stress. So
Yep.
even if we're setting their expectations and helping them understand what's upcoming, their lender may not be. So the more we can be involved, I just like to get on an email where I put the buyers on and the lender, and any questions go back and forth through that group. So if the lender's asking for something, I can jump in and answer it. If I'm asking something, the lender can jump in. The buyers can be there to, pop in with their questions, ask for clarification, or just see what's happening in the conversation. So they're in the loop.
Sure.
But then I'm not saying like, hey, here's one more thing I need you to do. Go call your lender and ask this question, when like a lot of people aren't real jazzed about having those conversations and might not even remember what you wanted them to ask and what follow-up questions would be best to ask. So having that direct line to the lender, I think, is really important. And also just to understand like what is happening in this moment. If you're still out there active and their programs have changed, their, interest rates, whatever it is, to know
Their lock has expired.
Yeah, has it expired? All those pieces are so important. And yes, finding out ahead of time, can you reach them on the weekend? Can you have their cell phone number? Because there's nothing worse than being ready to write an offer and they have an expired pre-approval and you can't get a hold of the lender and you're just stuck. So, and then you have to scramble with a different lender. So like get that all figured out ahead of time, and also get that pre-approval in your hand in their file before you write an offer. So when the expiration date is and you're not surprised, and what the, maximum amount is. So you can do a lot really proactively and in conjunction with the lender to make that a better situation for everybody.
Yeah. Oh, you guys, so much great information. Thank you so much for being out there and doing a great job at what you do, and for pouring into this group and sharing how you do what you do. I didn't see any other questions come up. So I'm thinking one of the things that we're doing next week is kind of a defend your commission. And I know that we don't do that very often as a buyer's agent, but man, you guys earn every cent that you get out there for the work that you do for your people. And they're lucky to work with you. So unless there's any last minute comments or closing, I'm going to go one last round, closing remarks from all three of you. And then we're going to let everybody go to get on with their day. So Amanda, I'm going to start with you. Okay.
So I've said it more than once, but I'm going to say it again because I don't see anybody's camera but Gerardo. Thank you for doing that. So if y'all haven't been listening fully, it's all about setting expectations for your client, and it's all about building that relationship with the listing agent and the lender. Everybody is going to be working on this together, needs to be on the same page, feel confident, feel empowered, and know what the situation is. Nobody likes to be blindsided by surprises. So do the extra work ahead of time and throughout the process it's going to be better for everybody, and it's going to become habit for you to do it this way. And it unfortunately is rare, and that alone is going to help you stand out in a good way in competition.
Got it. You got it. Beth?
I agree with everything she says. And I also, because I, came into this business during COVID, so I haven't known another atmosphere, but I can tell by the recent change that it is nice to be going into a more of a buyer's market, because you don't have that PTSD happening so much anymore, where it's a panic to like drop and run and do all that kind of stuff. You have a few seconds to think and kind of prep your buyers a little bit more, which I feel is nice, kind of a nice breathing room. So I'm looking forward to the buyer's market.
Advantage of that breathing room for sure. Steph, how about you? Last remarks.
I'm just gonna piggyback on Amanda's sentiment about putting the time in early on. I'm a big proponent of buyer consultations. And just in the vein of, setting yourself up as a professional and demonstrating to your buyers how professional and organized you are. I mean, that's just another way and to ensure that you'll get referrals from your buyers and clients. So really work at your buyer consultation, get it nailed down. It's just such a key piece, the piece in all of this transaction.
Awesome. Love it. Well, thank you all for pouring into this group and sharing your professional tips and tricks, and just displaying great ways of going about doing your business. I love it. And everybody go take this and implement and build your business. It's a great time to be out there. So have a wonderful day. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.